"Leave your inhibitions at the door, the show is about to begin," says the DVD cover. "Sleek seductiveness, a world of exoticism and danger," said the New York Times. "Impossibly vulgar, tawdry, and coarse," said Variety. And San Francisco Examiner said, "Berkeley cannot act, and her dancing looks like a seizure." This is actually a quote from a film review written after the movie's release in September of 1995. So which film is this? It's Showgirls. A classic, tacky, erotic, Vegas-y film extravaganza, a 1990s male gaze cinematic peak that consists of exploited female nudity, toxic female behavior, competitiveness, general cattiness, a dash of lesbloitation, queerbaiting, a brutal rape scene of a black woman, mixed with shockingly over-the-top provocative dancing and general male sleaze, misogyny, all set to the backdrop of good old Las Vegas showgirl business as the excuse for all of the above. Just a quick spoiler alert before I continue. This review will absolutely be filled with spoilers, so just consider yourself warned. If you don't want to know the details of what happens in the film or the ending, probably better to watch the movie first and then watch this review. This film is about a young woman called Nomi Malone, her ambition and struggle in fulfilling her dream of being a high-class dancer in Las Vegas in an environment that is extremely toxic and exploitative of women, while playing a game of cat and mouse with her main rival and potential love interest, the leading showgirl herself, Crystal Connors. Showgirls is written by a man, was directed by a man, was produced by a bunch of men, and I think maybe one woman, because men are clearly experts on the female narrative, particularly the stories that center on female ambition, female self-expression, female sexuality, and of course female relationships, most especially lesbian relationships. Because of course they are. And that is exactly why this movie gave us such profound dialogue between the two female leads, such as, "I like nice tits, always have, how about you?" And the other replies, "I like having nice tits." But I'm getting ahead of myself. I chose to review Showgirls because I'd kind of heard about this film over the years. I knew it was a bit of a classic piece for the genre that it is, but I'd never actually got around to seeing it. And then I heard that it actually has some lesbian themes to it, which piqued my interest even more. And since I hadn't seen it prior, I thought it would be perfect to watch with my lesbian tropometer glasses on to see whether it's any good. And surprise, surprise, let's just say this movie is something else. The plot of the film: Nomi Malone, a young woman with a mysterious past, arrives to Las Vegas hoping to pursue her dream of being a top-class dancer. Right off the bat, she comes in contact with gross, seedy men, all who in one way or another hit on her or attempt to take advantage of her, while also letting her know that at some point, sooner or later, she'll have to sell sexual services in order to get to where she wants to in her career as a dancer in Vegas, to which she is particularly sensitive and standoffish. Nomi runs into and befriends a girl called Molly, the only normal and decent character in this entire film, and the two of them hit it off right away, become best friends and roommates. The only questionable thing about Molly is that she's obsessed with this musician dude called Andrew Carver, but more about him later on. Going into the film, not knowing what to expect though, and seeing Nomi and Molly's first interaction where they seem to actually have a moment between them, I did at first wonder whether their relationship would progress in a romantic way. Even Nomi herself asks Molly during their very first meeting, "Are you hitting on me?" However, the two remain only platonic friends throughout, even though they share many homoerotic moments living together in their tiny shack of a flat, or whatever it is. While Nomi works as a dancer at a seedy topless lounge called The Cheetah, Molly makes it possible for her to get her foot in the door in the higher-end Vegas showbiz industry by getting her to help out as a backstage assistant at the Stardust, a very classy place. At the Stardust, Nomi meets the top dancer in the business, a woman called Crystal Connors, who instantly dazzles Nomi. However, even though there appears to be a potential connection between the two, Nomi and Crystal seem to get off on the wrong foot, where Crystal ends up insulting Nomi by insinuating that the Cheetah, the topless lounge where Nomi works, has no class, and that the girls who work there sell more than just dancing, to which Nomi takes particular offense, even though it's kinda true. Still, later on, Crystal turns up at the Cheetah with her boyfriend Zach to watch Nomi perform, and ends up booking her for a lap dance for Zach. And this scene, this lap dance scene, turns out is a bit of an iconic moment for this movie. Possibly the moment that actually made Showgirls famous for what it is. Though I didn't know that till after I actually saw the movie. Kind of what happens is that Nomi is giving this lap dance, right? And she is kind of stark naked, and she's giving this lap dance in a very begrudging way to Zach, while Crystal watches from the other end of the room, looking very smug and patronizing, kind of, but also all sorts of intrigued, kind of getting hot and bothered watching Nomi do this lap dance for her boyfriend, and she appears to be clearly lusting after Nomi, even though Nomi is shooting like loathsome eye daggers at her the entire time. She is pissed that she has to do this lap dance in front of her to her boyfriend. And then Nomi, because she's really unhappy that Crystal had forced her into this position where she clearly has to sell more than just dancing, just as Crystal had said to her when they first met, Nomi decides to get even with her by doing this like really raw, crazy, berserk dancing move thing on Zach, where it kind of does look like she's having a seizure while simultaneously simulating like primal sex entirely naked on this guy, until he literally cannot help himself but combusts into a spontaneous orgasm. And I'm like, what the hell did I just watch? Anyways, I do have to say, the first time I watched this scene, my jaw did drop. I was not prepared for this. Yeah. But it was kind of like she was having like this super erotic seizure moment. That critic from San Francisco Examiner was not wrong. And you'd think that Crystal might get jealous or something that Nomi had such an effect on her boyfriend, but she appeared entirely unconcerned with that and just entirely focused on Nomi. Afterwards, however, Crystal herself secures Nomi an audition and a job at her own gig, no less, at the Stardust. Although the audition is super difficult for Nomi, where she's sexualized by the director of the show right from the start, while Crystal watches from a distance, just like she did during the lap dance, all the while giving Nomi sex eyes, appearing to enjoy seeing Nomi humiliated. When afterwards a super confused and upset Nomi then asks her why did she help her get the spot, Crystal replies, "Maybe I like the way you dance. Maybe I like you. What difference does it make?" To which Nomi replies, "I hate you." Which I'm beginning to gather is a standard reply to anyone confessing their lesbian feelings for another woman in movies that were made prior to the year 2000 and maybe afterwards too. Crystal says that she knows that she hates her, and I'm just hella confused because Crystal's motivation is very unclear, but definitely messed up. They do end up going on a date, however, as a way of starting over since they got off on the wrong foot, and that's when they have the conversation about boobs. So this is how the conversation goes. Crystal says, "I like nice tits. Always have. How about you?" Nomi replies, "I like having nice tits." Then Crystal says, "How do you like having them?" And Nomi replies, "What do you mean?" And Crystal says, "You know what I mean." Brilliant dialogue aside, I found this moment kinda interesting because Crystal is blatantly making it known that she is into women, right? But Nomi is not taking the bait. She gives a very non-committal answer, which, you know, it could be that she's still upset with Crystal and is being coy, or it could be that the creators of the film didn't want their lead character to confirm, in her own words, that she's queer too. Because, you know, you can have naked lesbians grinding on each other on a stage, but you cannot have the lead of the film verbally confirm that she is queer. Because that's just too gay. That's too much, that's too far, obviously. But baiting people apparently isn't too far. Because for the rest of that scene, Nomi and Crystal have some rather intense eye sex, where I nearly yelled at my TV, just kiss already. And they very, very nearly do during the next scene when they have this supercharged dance routine practice. Except just as they're about to kiss, Crystal puts her foot in it again by saying to Nomi, "You see, darling, you are a whore." At which point Nomi calls her a bitch and storms off, and I just want to throw my shoe at the screen. Next, Crystal hooks Nomi up with another dance gig, which at first seems like a nice gesture. But then it turns out that she had set her up because the gig implies sex is included in the deal. And then to get back at her, Nomi ends up having a fling with none other than Zach Carey, Crystal's boyfriend. And they end up sleeping together, and that sex scene is just something else again. It's basically a repeat of the crazy lap dance scene, except in a swimming pool. Let's just say there were many waves in that pool by the end, and someone may or may not have appeared as though they were being eaten by jaws. And then for the rest of the movie, Nomi and Crystal basically hate each other, continue to play the game of cat and mouse where each one tries to outdo, undercut, and sabotage the other, and it's just really, really awful and toxic. There are many shots of long female nails being filed, you know, like symbolic of cattiness, which Crystal ultimately prevents Nomi from becoming her successor at the Stardust, after which Nomi pushes Crystal down the stairs, landing her at the hospital, essentially ending her career as the reigning showgirl in Las Vegas. Nomi then inherits the much coveted lead position at the Stardust, becomes the next it dancer in Vegas, and finally all her dreams come true. The end. I wish. No. So during a grand celebratory party at the Stardust to celebrate Nomi's debut as the lead dancer, her roommate Molly attends as well. Molly ends up running into that musician Andrew Carver, you remember the one that I mentioned at the beginning, that she so idolizes, and then in a scene that is just so unexpected, so entirely unwarranted and horrific and brutal and graphic, where I was genuinely shocked and sickened. This Andrew Carver guy, right? For no reason at all other than he can. He randomly ends up beating Molly. He beats her bloody, and then he gang rapes her along with his bodyguards until she drops unconscious. Like, why? Why? It's not enough to have exploited female bodies, female sexuality, female relationships, lesbian relationships. Let's just throw in a truly disgusting scene where a black woman, and the only actually likable, normal character, gets absolutely brutalized. When Nomi tries to intervene and have her boyfriend, Zach, report Andrew Carver to the police, it turns out Andrew has too many connections, he is too powerful, and nothing can be done to tarnish him. It turns out Zach and Andrew Carver and most of the other men running the showbiz in Vegas are all connected and all help and protect one another. And women like Molly and Nomi and even Crystal are all replaceable to them. Therefore, there would be no justice for Molly. Right around the same time, information about Nomi's past leaks out. It turns out she was a sex worker before moving to Vegas to start over, which is supposedly why she was particularly sensitive to being called things like whore, etc. Just as her world starts falling apart, Nomi decides to take matters into her own hands and revenge Molly herself. And the way she does that is by showing up at Andrew Carver's hotel room, dressed in an outfit which one can assume is from her previous occupation, because it's all like tiny miniskirt, leopard print, of course, because, you know, cattiness, predator symbolism again. Thigh-high killer boots, looking very different to her usual self. Andrew thinks he's about to get laid. However, Nomi starts pulling these moves where she turns into an absolute ninja and beats him to a pulp with her boots. I was watching this scene and I was like, what is happening? I did have to suspend my belief here a little bit, because it's just a little too convenient that Nomi was hiding her super fighting skills like a secret weapon this entire time. But then again, being a vigorous professional dancer, I guess her body is pretty much just pure muscle. So, okay, I will give them that one. Just as she's about to skip town and start someplace else yet again, she decides to pay one last visit to Crystal, who is still at the hospital. Nomi turns up at the hospital and she apologizes to Crystal for what she did to her. And then Crystal confesses to her that she had actually scored her big break in the industry in the exact same way, by pushing her predecessor down the stairs, thus justifying and absolving both Nomi and herself, as well as the writers who created them, of such horrible, toxic behavior between women. Seriously. And then, just as Nomi is about to leave, Crystal says to her, and this is another, like, brilliant dialogue moment, "Aren't you gonna come here and give me a big kiss?" And I swear, if Gina Gershon wasn't there to inject some humanity into this line, this whole thing would have just been a horrible fiasco. Even more so than what it already was. But despite the cheesy line, Crystal shows genuine longing, and so Nomi caves. She kisses Crystal, and though I was so glad, so glad, and relieved that it finally happened after all of the baiting, the kiss is as exploity as everything else in Showgirls. Nomi then leaves, Crystal cries, we see Nomi leave Las Vegas in the exact same way as she arrived, and that's essentially it. That's the movie. So, a couple of fun facts about the film. Number 1. Showgirls has made it to a number of worst acted movie lists over the years, mostly targeted at Elizabeth Berkley, who plays the lead of Nomi Malone, which I think is a little bit mean. I think a role like this one, playing the lead in Showgirls, would have required so much mental strength and stamina, and oh my god, you have to see the movie to understand what I mean. And I think she absolutely gave it her all. I thought her rawness was well suited for the character, and I actually appreciated that about her. And number 2, both the director and the writer of Showgirls also wrote and directed Basic Instinct, a movie that also, completely coincidentally, features infamous scenes of female nudity along with an infamous super toxic sexualized queer female character. What a coincidence. Am I seeing a pattern here? I do believe they have a type. And though I expected there would be some nudity in the film, since, I mean, it's called Showgirls and it is rated R18, plus its reputation kind of precedes it, but I did not expect, and I was not prepared for the lead actress to be spending virtually all of her screen time actually topless, if not completely naked, sometimes dancing, sometimes simulating sex. On the other hand, as far as the queer side of things go, I really had no clue what to expect. I thought there might be at most a queerbaiting kiss or flirting between some random secondary characters or something, or maybe vague subtext with some of the main characters or something along those lines. And I was pretty much right about those things, but And here's the thing. At first glance, this film might appear to be about a young woman's pursuit of her dreams of being a dancer in Vegas, in an environment that is extremely toxic and exploitative of women, requiring her to make sacrifices almost every step of the way, testing her morals and character as a person, with the main question of the film being, at what price is your dream still worth pursuing? However, shift your point of view a little bit, and it can be said that the film is also about people's inability to accept, to embrace their own selves entirely. In the case of the main character Nomi, this means running from her past as a sex worker, and in the case of Crystal, Nomi's main rival and lusting lesbian frenemy, it is her inability to accept her big old gay feelings for Nomi, where instead of exploring their connection, which she so clearly wants to do, she instead antagonizes and baits Nomi, turns her into a rival, self-sabotaging their relationship in virtually every second scene they have together. Crystal falls prey to the toxic environment of which both she and Nomi become an active part, and chooses to pursue and sabotage Nomi as her rival in the business, to her own eventual detriment and downfall, which is all very rather unfortunate. But, in all honesty, I also feel like I'm giving the movie far too much credit, because honestly, the movie is mostly just about tits and ass. And the sleaze, oh my gosh, it's out of this world. Showgirls is a typical early to mid 1990s piece, where casual misogyny, sexual harassment, things like groping, men slapping and grabbing women's backside, is treated as standard, like a standard portrayal of the real world, even if we're supposed to know this is exaggerated because it's showbiz in Las Vegas. Therefore, it should be kind of normal and to be expected. Women are exploited, treated as expendable, replaceable objects of lust. Virtually every man on screen seems to want something extra with every girl he comes in contact with, which, after the whole Weinstein case, I mean this in Hollywood and in real life now, it just all feels a lot more real and sinister, and definitely not more acceptable just because it's set in 1990s and in a seedy part of Las Vegas. Even Nomi's boss at the Cheetah makes it known to the new girl, Penny, that she'll have to give him a blowjob if she wants to last a week at her place of employment. So, is there anything positive or enjoyable about this movie at this point? Well, the extremely questionable, nauseating stuff aside, overall, I guess it isn't an unenjoyable movie. I mean, I did find myself sympathizing with Nomi a lot before all of the catty behavior between her and Crystal began. After that, I was mostly just kinda annoyed. However, I do have to say, even though it didn't work out between Nomi and Crystal, romantically speaking, I was a bit surprised watching this movie for the first time and seeing all of their will they, won't they, lust and rivalry thing, because I did not expect that this would play out in such a big way between the two lead female characters of the film. I mean, other things do happen in the film and there are other characters that come and go, but their relationship, as toxic as it is, and even if Nomi has a lot more physical sexual interaction with other male characters, it's still very central to the plot, complete with all of the lesbian undertones and overtones, which was genuinely a surprise to me, and I did enjoy some aspects of it. Of course, even that comes with its own price, however, because yes, the relationship is exploitative, and it is toxic, and it is baity as hell. And I'm going to explore all of that in more detail now through the tropometer. Queerbaiting. By the classical definition of the term queerbaiting, which is that straight or straight-passing characters are baited as potentially queer through subtext, Showgirls wouldn't fall in the category of queerbaiting because both Crystal and Nomi are explicitly shown to be in fact queer. The main proof of that being in that after the whole will they won't they game that they play throughout the movie, they do actually kiss at the very end of the movie. Therefore, by the classic definition of queerbaiting, technically speaking, this film was not queerbaiting. However, considering a more modern perspective on queerbaiting, as well as the context and purpose of this relationship, which was essentially to create sexual tension and tantalize the mostly straight male audience, I think it isn't unreasonable to say that the entire movie was, in fact, rather queerbaity. The reason being that there was a promise or a potential for a relationship between these two characters, but what we got instead was an extremely warped unhealthy rivalry between these two women, where even that one extremely zoomed in lesbloity kiss at the very end does not really make up for a film-long toxic relationship that very much banked on queerbaiting. Both the characters and their relationships were in fact bait in and of themselves. Therefore, I do think this kind of qualifies for queerbaiting overall, and I am going to deduct 5 points for this. Homoerotic subtext. Yes. Oh my god, yes. There definitely was a lot of homoeroticism going on, which kind of blows my mind. From the very first woman-to-woman interaction between the characters, there was already homoeroticism at play. Nomi meets Molly. She rubs her head in a sexual needy way against Molly's. They oogle at each other across the table when they eat food. Nomi asks her whether she's hitting on her. Later on in their flat, Nomi's wearing a bra, she's reaching for something over Molly, and that's all at the very beginning of the film. That's the intro of the film. And this is supposed to be between two supposedly platonic friends, without even going into everything that happens between Nomi and Crystal. Which begs the question, why? What was the purpose of this? Why homoeroticize female relationships right from the beginning of this film? The only answer I can come up with is actually exploitation. I guess this is what we get when men are entirely in control of female stories. And for this, I'm deducting 5 points. Queer coding. I did notice some queer coding here in that Crystal was at times wearing like a cowboy style jacket and hat, appearing more masculine next to the uber feminine Nomi. But I'm unsure whether this is prominent enough to be counted as queer coding, so I'm going to let this pass. Lipstick lesbian. Absolutely. Even though both Nomi and Crystal appear to be technically bisexual, not lesbian, they both absolutely fit the bill of lipstick lesbian in terms of physical appearance and presentation. Let's keep in mind that men created these characters, so naturally they are sexy, attractive, appealing, beautiful, feminine by conventional standards of beauty. In other words, they are gay enough to be hot and unthreatening, straight enough to be accessible. Nomi, in particular, resembles the Milo Manera fantasy sex doll archetype. Bi-erasure. There wasn't bi-erasure that I could see in Showgirls, but the way these characters' sexuality is portrayed, even though they are sexually fluid in nature, it didn't exactly leave me feeling empowered. I think that's the word I want to use, and this is just looking at the overall picture of the movie. Their sexuality feels more exploited overall than empowering, used to create further drama rather than to depict genuine reflection of relationships. So even though these are sexually confident characters and there was no bi-erasure per se, I don't feel I can give them positive points on this, so I'm just going to pass. Shameful secret. Okay, so this is an interesting and difficult one because there was no shameful secret in terms of sexuality as such. Although Crystal's behavior is plenty problematic in that she kept on sabotaging her relationship with Nomi while simultaneously trying to bait Nomi into coming out and confirming that she is like her, that she is like Crystal, aka into boobs. There was almost like an element of self-loathing in Crystal when she behaved in this way, even though she came across as sexually confident when it came to her attraction towards another woman. On the other hand, it could be that she simply is a closeted lesbian. However, by the pressure and circumstances of the entertainment industry that she is a part of, she had to cave and get sexually involved with the men in power in order to attain professional prestige. This factor, this selling of sex in exchange for privilege and position, is something that is explicitly mentioned in the movie multiple times in various ways. This is why she stated that both she, Crystal, and Nomi, and every other girl in the industry are essentially prostitutes, to which Nomi replied, "I'll never be like you." This, however, is coincidentally right after Crystal confesses to her that she likes boobs, that whole conversation about boobs.
You and me, we're exactly alike.
So there most definitely is double meaning hidden in this conversation. On the one hand, Nomi refuses to go down the path of sex work again, On the other, she refuses to acknowledge her attraction to Crystal, which becomes apparent soon after, and is even sealed with a kiss in the end. Does this mean that she'll never be a prostitute like Crystal, or does this mean she'll never like boobs like Crystal? That's some very, very intricate play on words here, and some pretty sinister double meaning that they're trying to inject into the dialogue. Perhaps Crystal and her self-sabotaging homosexuality are a part of that. And perhaps that's why Zach, her boyfriend, said to her after she found out that he had slept with Nomi, "That piss you off because you're jealous, or because I beat you to the punch?" And the way he said that is kind of patronizing, kind of like belittling. Almost like he knows a certain secret about Crystal that is not exactly shown in the best light. Plus, the way Crystal reacted to it appeared as though he had touched a sore spot. So I will deduct 5 points on this trope, because even though they were sneaky in masking this trope of internalized homophobia with all the lesboitation and queerbaiting, it is still present in the subtext of the film, and it is important to be aware of it. Psycho-lesbian. I mean, all of these characters are borderline psychotic, but none of them fit the trope exactly. Lesbian predator, on the other hand, definitely. Even though Nomi grows into a predator herself and succeeds Crystal in that, beating her at her own game, Crystal definitely starts off as the predatory queer woman, holding her power of both money and position, prestige, as a way of manipulating Nomi. Therefore, I will not deduct 5 points for the psycho-lesbian trope, but I will deduct 5 points for the lesbian predator. Punish the lesbian. Yes, there was the trope of punish the lesbian. Crystal, the more proactively queer character, certainly gets punished by the very woman she lusts over. Crystal openly states that she likes women. Nomi replies, "I'll never be like you." In the course of the film, Crystal gets physically punished by being pushed down the stairs, ends up at the hospital. Her career forever ended, while Nomi, who more convincingly resists her homosexual urges, scores her dream job and remains girl on top. Therefore, 5 points deducted for punish the lesbian. Left for a man. Even though Crystal and Nomi never actually get together, Nomi does have sex with Zach, Crystal's boyfriend for all intents and purposes, which is a manipulation and playing dirty, but since Nomi and Crystal are never a couple, I guess this doesn't count, although I did not enjoy this aspect at all. I guess I will still give them a pass. Lesbians only hold hands. Again, this is a difficult one, because in this film, the queer women certainly do a lot more than hold hands. On stage, though. On stage when they're practicing or performing. Therefore, it doesn't exactly count, does it? In their personal, private time, they stare intensely at one another, share one kiss at the end of the movie, and have one erotic dance practice that culminates in a supercharged moment between the two characters. Still, in comparison to all the things Nomi does with the men who enter her life in her career in Vegas, there is a distinction in the depiction of queer intimacy compared to heterosexual intimacy in Showgirls. And that is what this trope is essentially about, the treatment and portrayal of lesbian intimacy in comparison to the treatment and portrayal of heterosexual intimacy. However, going by the classical definition of this trope, where lesbian intimacy is completely neglected in the film, I cannot deduct points for this. However, I can deduct all the points for the next trope, which is Lesbophobic. Lesbophobic! Okay, where do I even begin? While Showgirls' portrayal of deliberate lesboitation is supposed to mirror the real world, where lesbian intimacy is exploited for predominantly men's pleasure, be it in strip bars, on the stage, or elsewhere, this film keenly takes advantage of this factor and deliberately banks on the same portrayal for shock value. Whether actually queer or not, multiple female characters in Showgirls engage in erotic performances of homoerotic nature more than once throughout the film. Nomi and Crystal's dynamic is virtually the definition of lesboitation. During their first dance practice, Crystal undoes Nomi's top and renders her topless in a way that appears to suggest they're about to engage with each other in an intimate way, that their relationship would progress to the next level. However, a stop is put to this very quickly, as it is revealed that Crystal baited Nomi deliberately as a way of getting under her skin, to prove a point. Not only does their relationship not progress to the next level, it deteriorates and sours from that moment on. Even their kiss at the end of the film, which is supposed to serve as a type of closure and provide some relief for all the queerbaiting that occurs in the film, the way it is framed in close-up and conducted in the first place appears as much for shock value, for show. The final time we get to see two women engage in this shocker of a film, so they better make it good even though they'll never be a couple type thing, rather than a genuine intimate exchange between two people. It is obvious these characters appear to have been created to be just queer, just lesbian enough to be appealing and sexy to the male audience, while being straight enough to appear accessible and attainable to the same audience. They are the ultimate male fantasy, let's be honest, created by men for men. Blonde brunette. The final trope we have in the film is the blonde brunette trope, which, of course, that's an easy one, so 5 points deducted. And for the final trope, lesbian named Lena, I am saddened to say that with all the female characters running around and all the false names they picked out for themselves, not one dancer thought to call herself Lena. Why? But anyways, counting all of the trope points, Showgirls scores negative 40 points on the tropometer. That is pretty extreme. Negative 40 points. This film has managed to exploit queer women in at least 8 different harmful ways and has failed to subvert a single trope. Though I suppose this is what we get when men write, direct and produce films depicting women's stories and lesbian stories, something they couldn't possibly have first-hand knowledge in, but rather they dare to fill in the blanks of actual experience and reduce our existence and sexuality to their own dream fantasy-fueled version of what we're supposed to be like. This is extremely exploitative of queer female sexuality that only perpetuates the harmful false idea that lesbians exist primarily for men's pleasure. And it is not far-fetched to say that it is exactly because of films of this type that many men in real life, when they come across a queer woman or a lesbian couple, think it's acceptable to be disrespectful, to not take them seriously, assume that they would engage with him in a sexual manner. Obviously, movies are not entirely to blame. This is a very complex social problem, but it certainly does not help. What is clear is that these types of on-screen portrayals do have real-life, harmful, dangerous repercussions. And not only that, but the men who created Showgirls created the dynamic between the two female leads. They created them to be toxically competitive with one another, to the point of behaving criminally and physically harming one another. This in turn perpetuates the idea that women in general perceive each other as rivals, as enemies, rather than as friends and allies, which in turn seeps into the consciousness of both men and women in real life, informing them of their role and place in the world in a subliminal way. It is no wonder that many men in real life still believe that women are only ever catty and cannot be friends with each other. In conclusion, reductive movies such as these have existed for far too long, where the men in positions of power in Hollywood maintain the power of say on what kinds of female narratives are being told on screen, something that they have absolutely no business meddling in. And this is exactly why I wanted to do a female-centric review series like this. One more voice highlighting the behind-the-scenes problems that occur in our society in hopes of moving forward in a better, more constructive way. This is why it is important to support female-produced, female-written, directed films. It is time for women to be in charge of the female narrative and for queer people to be in charge of the queer narrative. And that's not to say that no man should ever again write a female-centric story or even a queer female story. But if they do, I should hope that by now they know to approach these topics with sincerity, with respect and care.